Every landscape in England once held a story. Hills that were carved by giants, springs that held healing powers, and caves that were a doorway to another world. But most of these stories are gone. Tolkien described it as the biggest shame in English history. Where has England's myths gone? Across the British Isles, Scotland, Wales and Ireland all have stories that are rich with mythology. Tales that were passed down from generation to generation to a time before modern writing and language. They were attempts to understand the world around them. Why did the seasons change? What were the stars in the sky? And what made the sun rise and set again? These were stories of life and of death and the journey in between. But what has happened to England's mythology? Why has it been lost? And why do we not have these cultural tales in the same way our neighbours have? When the Celts arrived in Britain between 1300 and 800 BC, they wove a vast oral tradition of druids, of heroes, and sacred groves. Their stories were about gods who ruled over nature, of the rivers, the forests, the mountains and the sky. What is now England shared these stories, but much of what we know is only survived by tales in Scotland, Wales and Ireland. But even these stories were written down much later by Christian priests. In the year 43 AD, the Romans had arrived in Britain, but conquest didn't erase ancient myth. Instead, they reshaped them and rebranded them. Celtic gods became Romanized, sacred sites became temples, and oral tradition was suppressed. When Christianity swept across ancient Rome, it became the first layer of England's mythic burial. By the 6th century, a new wave of tales had been brought to England with the arrival of the Anglo-Saxons, with gods such as Woden, Thunor and Tyr. For a while, England had its own living mythology again. By the time England had converted to Christianity, monks who recorded these stories altered and demonized them in an attempt to suppress pagan beliefs and glorify their own. This can be seen across the British Isles, where tales became filtered through a Christian lens. Gods and heroes became saints or demons, and sacred sites were renamed and built upon. Soon, mythology all but vanished, watered down into superstition and folklore. After 1066, with the Norman conquest, we see stories of knights, of dragons and of saints that grafted onto native lore. By the 14th century, we see figures like Robin Hood, King Arthur and St. George. But these were not myths, these were legends. And things go quiet until the 18th and 19th century. We see this resurgence, this interest in folklore, and suddenly tales that were once forgotten and now seep back into cultural memory. We see a revival in stories of witches, of boggarts, and of superstition, of fairies. Stories that find their roots in ancient tales. However, perhaps the final nail in England's mythological coffin comes with the Industrial Revolution. As England became one of the first countries on the globe to modernise, it lost its myth and folk memory. These stories were rooted in rural communities, and these were lost with industrialization, and people became severed from the land that held their myths. But I don't think it's gone. We still see evidence in the names of places today. We see hints of folklore and mythology on old maps. We see seasonal festivals that take their roots much earlier in time. It is our surviving folklore, and these are fragments of the buried world. There's a growing interest in this forgotten past. More people are becoming aware and searching out these stories, myself included. And people are hungry for tales with meaning. And they are starting to look at what was passed down by our ancestors across this land. I believe it's only through finding these stories and telling them that we can preserve them. And with it, we can revive England's mythic past. Thanks for watching. Let me know your thoughts below. If you want to see more videos like these, drop a comment. Thank you.